What does getting blacklisted mean, exactly? Well, it's the assumption that a player is shunned by the NBA because they engaged in behavior that was unacceptable. Usually, players get punished by getting suspended or fined, but even after that, teams still want to avoid them. It's happened quite a few times across history, some of which you could argue is not justified. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's take a look at some NBA players who got blacklisted. And these happened in recent years. Will they ever return and be given another chance? Let's take a look. Kevin Porter Jr., the most recent example of a young, rising player with all-star potential who saw his career turn for the worse. On September 11, 2023, Kevin Porter Jr. was arrested and charged for assault on his girlfriend, which left her with a fractured neck. A month later, the Houston Rockets traded him in what seemed like a salary dump to Oklahoma City, where Porter got waived shortly after. It seems kinda crazy at first, because the NBA never usually takes domestic violence seriously. Usually, they would work it out depending on how talented the player is. And considering Porter was on the come-up, it's shocking he got flat-out waived. This time, however, it's different. Facing a second-degree strangulation and a third-degree assault charge, no team wants to have that reputation of condoning these kind of acts. Porter's name is in shambles, and it wasn't the first time something like this happened. Over the years, the Rockets have become accustomed to Porter's outbursts. According to Woj, he stated, Porter has well-documented anger management issues, which the team believes he has made progress on, but those surfaced again Saturday, and ultimately drove him to leave the arena instead of rejoining the team. This was happening very early in his tenure with the Rockets, and they hoped he could change for the better. For a guy like him, working his way up from being the last pick of the first round, nobody questioned his work ethic and his drive to succeed. But those ridiculous outbursts and the frequent fights with his coaching staff, Porter lost his composure way too often. And it slowly became intolerable. When it culminated with his domestic assault charge, the Rockets knew it was time to move on, and there was no saving this situation. I don't think all hope is lost for him. If Miles Bridges can get another shot, I'm sure eventually a team will pick up Porter. As of now, though, every team in the league made a clear statement by not signing him. It's saying, we don't want to associate with you until you change. Andrii Caner, or by his new name, Enes Freedom. His exodus from the NBA is quite an interesting case. Apparently, the dude has a $500,000 bounty on his head from the Turkish government. On February 8, 2022, Caner played supposedly his final NBA game with the Boston Celtics. On February 10th, he got traded to the Houston Rockets in what seemed like a horrendous deal for the Celtics. I mean, they gave up all this just to get Daniel Tice? There has to be something else going on. Well, Caner would get quickly waived by the Rockets, and up until this video, never played another NBA game. Caner believed it was because he was vocal about his views of the Chinese government, and because the NBA generates a lot of money from China, teams did not want to be associated with somebody who might hurt their revenue. Although Adam Silver claims anybody is free to speak out on issues they care about and denied that Caner was, blacklisted, this can't all be a coincidence. The moment he starts talking about this, he stops getting minutes, and then he gets traded and waived, and never seen in the NBA again? You can't say he's too old or he lacks talent or something. The year prior, he was an important piece for the Blazers. It's hard to believe he all of a sudden lost his skills on the Celtics. If you remember, China actually stopped broadcasting games of the Boston Celtics after Caner's comments, and it took a while for them to show them again. So perhaps there was some pressure by the higher-ups to play Caner as few minutes as possible. We'll never know the full story, but we do know ever since all that stuff happened, plus being on Turkey's most wanted list, no team has given Caner another shot. In fact, he hasn't even gotten any tryouts, so teams aren't looking for him. There have been comparisons of the blacklisting of Caner to that of Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who got blacklisted for refusing to stand for the national anthem in 1996. Essentially, what these two guys have in common is Despite the NBA's advocacy for speaking out on political issues, it all changes when it starts hurting their bottom line. O.J. Mayo. The story of O.J. Mayo is hard to fathom, but you probably don't know the full truth either. From a high school phenom to the third overall pick of the draft, Mayo found success in every stage of basketball. But beneath the surface of his seemingly unbreakable exterior was a man who longed for forgiveness. On July 1st, 2016, the NBA suspended him for violating the drug policy for his use of marijuana and an exorbitant amount of painkillers. The suspension would last for 2 years, and then he'd be eligible to apply for reinstatement in 2018. However, almost immediately following his suspension, Mayo was filled with regret and fell into a deep spiral of loneliness, embarrassment, and depression. Without basketball, he had nothing. I didn't get a phone call last summer from anybody besides my family for 40 days. I still haven't talked to some people who I'd used to talk to every week. Taking the game away is probably the closest thing to jail that I'll get to. Since I was like 6 or 7, I've always had a basketball season. This was the lowest point in my entire life. Mayo was fortunate enough to have a family who supported him. I think his suspension from the NBA is a good reminder that it's not the suspension itself that hurts. It's that you get ostracized from society, from your friends, and from people around the league you've hung out with for so many years. They stop calling you the instant you're gone. Even though it's been several years since he's been eligible to return to the NBA, he still hasn't. It's not without a lack of trying. Mayo has held private workouts. He's tried contacting his old friends and trainers to see if there's any way he could get back in. At this time, age is not on his side. Maybe one day, he might get another chance. Dion Waiters. On October 19, 2019, Dion Waiters was suspended by the Miami Heat for just one game. Pat Riley released a statement saying there was a bunch of unacceptable moments and misconduct, but they remained vague on what really happened. First, nobody thought much of this suspension. It was only one game, after all. It was before the season even started, so it wasn't a big deal, right? Well, it spiraled out of control. That one-game suspension led to a 10-game suspension, then another 6-game suspension. Waiters even had a panic attack after consuming way too many edibles, and during his recovery, he would continue to not follow the team's policies, and even faked an illness to avoid practice. The Heat traded him away, and he got waived instantly. Funny enough, the Lakers picked him off waivers. He even won a championship against his former team. This would be the last time he appeared in the NBA. For several years, Dion didn't have much interest in returning until his 10-year-old son asked him a question. "Dad, why aren't you in the NBA anymore?" To which Dion responded, "Your dad is not out of the league because of talent. It was my attitude, my character. I was so irresponsible and immature. I let the Heat down. They were good to me. I did not handle it well at all." On the bright side, Waiters has gotten a couple of workouts with some teams, but since 2020, he's still waiting to make his return, if it ever happens. In recent years, I feel like there's been a bigger shift in how players get blacklisted or blackballed. In the past, if you were, a locker room cancer, if you had off-court issues with the law, you could still get by if you had enough talent. A team isn't gonna pass on you because you're a head case, as long as you could play. Nowadays, I feel like it's different. There's less tolerance for stuff like that. Just look at Miles Bridges, who basically got suspended an entire season. In the past, they'd separate what happens on the court versus off the court. Things you did off the court were never taken as seriously. You never saw a player get suspended this long for a domestic assault case. Now, this set a new precedent that your place in the NBA should not be taken for granted, and every player needs to abide by certain standards. With the era of social media, the backlash spreads fast. Teams will get hammered if they picked up a guy who just had a serious charge against him. In the long run, I think it's better for the NBA to be more protective of their image. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were several players who, they're basically blacklisted from the NBA. Though I can see some of these guys returning eventually. We just don't know when. But I'm sure their stories are not over yet. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoy the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.